Dan is going to just let me this party going. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Tony Harris Taylor. I am the franchise owner of Network in Action. I run a virtual group, uh, and we meet on a monthly basis. And I live in Houston, Texas, but my network and my group, they meet all over the country. So, welcome. I have the privilege of introducing you to Star Bobatoon, who has been a member of Network in Action. I've been a franchisee for 6 years. At least 3 of those 6 years, she has been a member. And I love, love, love Star. So, Star Bobatoon has over 30 years of experience as a performer on stage and screen, as an attorney, and as an award winning keynote speaker, top performing trainer, and workshop facilitator. As a public speaking and communications expert, Star works with professional women in leadership and in business to sharpen their communication and performance skills so they can deliver compelling messages to amplify their influence and their impact. She works with men too, by the way. Certified consultant in AI, Star is dedicated to using cutting edge technology to advance communication skills and empower professionals to increase their effectiveness. The rest of this is like la la la. She has been she is one of the best buds to Les Brown, who actually trained her. But I got to tell you about Star. Star is my best friend. We met across a crowded digital screen similar to this. We started our relationship on virtual networking, and then we met in person and have been attached at the hip since 2013. So she's more than just a Network in Action member. She is my sister and client. I want to welcome to the stage my friend, my girl, Star Bobatoon. What? And the crowd goes wow. Thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate that. Hey, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, got a question for you. Well, see, here's the deal. I want you to think about a sales conversation that you had recently that didn't go exactly as you wanted it to go, right? Nothing dramatic happened, nothing, traumatic, just a sales conversation that stalled. I want you to think about that. And my question for you is, what went wrong? What went wrong? What caused it to stall? And where did it stall? Beginning, middle, end? When you brought up the price? Where did it stall? Put that in the chat for me. I just want to know. Think of a sales conversation you've had recently, didn't go the way you hoped, kind of went sideways. What happened? So it was the price, the time commitment. Yes. When did it go wrong? At what point? Unsigned contract for 3 months. How frustrating is that? Anything else? Anything else? Come on, play with me. Oh, my anxiety took over, and most of it was I can relate to that. Price, it fell apart at the signing. Okay. All right. So I'm getting a good idea. I'm getting a good idea of what went wrong, when it went wrong. Okay. All right. They're saying that a person chose to maintain the status quo. They're like, can you send me your info? All right, all right. So I see all of that. Now, what I know is that in all of these conversations, it wasn't your expertise. It wasn't your ability. It wasn't your product or your services, right? It was none of that. But I've had these conversations too, and it's because something was missing from the conversation. You know what? There was a time that I was up for a paid speaking engagement, right? My name had been shared by someone who saw me speak somewhere at another event. And so when the organizer reached out to me She's very upfront. She's very clear. She's like, yeah, I've already spoken to two other person. You're actually the third person. The other two are pretty strong, but because you were referred, I said that I would give you the opportunity. And so I wanted to make sure I talked with you. Talk about letting me know exactly where I ranked. You see what I'm saying? She's like, don't get your hopes up because you are not my first choice. That's all right. And you know what? She probably didn't say it that way, but that's the way I remember it, Daniel. That's the way I remember it. So I was her third choice. So we get on the call. And like a typical sales call, she spends the first part of it telling me about the event, the audience, what she's hoping for, what mattered. And I listened. Then she asked me my favorite question. My favorite question, y'all. My favorite question is, so tell me about you and what you do. Evil maniacal laugh right there. So in that moment, I knew I had a choice. Now I could do what most people do. I could start listing my accolades and all the beautiful things you do, my credentials. I could have done that. Where I've spoken, who I've spoken to, where I've trained, all the reasons why I was qualified. I could have gone there, people, but I didn't. Instead, I told her a story, my signature story. So I talked about starting out my life, my childhood in the spotlight. I was an actress at the very young stage. I talked about stepping away from that to keep the peace in my family, to make other people comfortable. And later in my life, I found myself in a place where on the outside, everything looked beautiful. But on the inside, something wasn't right. And I'm asking you, NIA, have you ever been in a situation where nothing is wrong? And I mean, nothing is wrong, but something's not right. If you've ever been there, put a me in the chat. I just want to know if you've ever been there. Nothing's wrong. Things are good. You have so much to be grateful for. But baby, something's not right. So I talked about that. And I talked about the fact that my life completely fell apart. I mean, my job went away, my father died, my marriage fell apart. And that took me in a place of, depression. I went spiraling. But then I went to this motivational conference, right? And I'm watching these people on the stage and I'm remembering how much I love to be on the stage. And in that moment, I decided to come back to the stage to reclaim my voice and went on to tell her the things that I accomplished since then. And I let her know that this was why it was so important to me to help professionals communicate with impact and with influence, because I know what it is like to lose my voice. Boom. So now, as I'm telling her my story, and it was a longer story, as I'm telling her my story, she's doing all the recognition things, the feedback that we like, where they're she's nodding her head, she's going, yeah, I know, and then shaking her. She's just doing all the things. What she was doing was seeing herself in what I was saying. And when I finished tell me who you are, what you do. When I finished, there was no long pause. There was no hesitation. She said, yeah, so I'd like to offer you the opportunity. And of course I accepted. Da, 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 da. Excellent. All right. And so just like that, boys and girls, that conversation turned into a client. Now, I know she asked the other people the same thing. The people she talked to before me that she liked more than me, I know she asked them the same question. Tell me about who you are, what you do. And I know what they did. They started listing. I've spoken here, I've spoken there. They started listing their accolades. I don't know, but I bet that that's what they did. And those are all important things. But here's what I know for sure, that conversation did not convert because I was the first choice. It wasn't because I was the smartest. No, that conversation shifted because I did something that the other people didn't do. So here's what you need to know. I'm trying to get my slides up.
So here's what I know. Here's what I know. Sales conversations don't break down because people lack experience. They break down because something's missing from the conversation. Now, I need you to tell me, what might I be talking about? What might be missing from the conversation? Put in the chat for me. Put in the chat what's missing from the conversation. Connection, yes. Rapport, yes. Personal touch, yes. Yes, relating, yes. And you know what it all boils down to, ladies and gentlemen? It all boils down to a story, right? All of that you're talking about, emotional connection, heart level, listening, relating, connection, it's all in the story. And that is why that's our topic for today. We are talking about sell with story, harnessing the power of story to drive sales. Woo! That is what we're talking about today. And as you know, I'm a communications and presentation coach. I work with professionals, men and women, to enhance their communication skills so they can increase their impact and their influence. Now, here is my list of accolades. They're right here. You could see them. 10 years acting on stage and screen, 10 years as a litigation attorney, 15 years as an award-winning international speaker and trainer, trained by Les Brown, #1 trainer in the national training company. Those are all my accomplishments, but that's not what I told her. And the mistake most people make on their calls is they make this list, they take this list and they just start speaking this list. But what I did instead is I took all of those elements, put them in a story. I put them all in a story. So I wasn't just reciting a list of accolades, right? I was getting her to feel the story, right? And that's what I'm talking about today. Conversations that convert. Now, here's what we're not going to talk about. We're not going to talk about scripts. We're not going to talk about pressure tactics. We're not going to talk about performance, but we are going to talk about why conversations stall. Why? What's going on? That is what we're going to talk about. So the first reason that sales conversations stall that I want to talk to you about is that the conversation stays external, right? You're talking about yourself. You're talking about your services. You're talking about your background, but you're not inviting the listener, the prospect, into the conversation, right? It's all about you. And so they're sitting back and they're listening politely, but there's no connection. They're not involved. And then the second issue is that there's no emotional context, right? The facts are shared, but nothing helps the other person say, well, how does that relate to me, right? What's that got to do with me? My grandma used to say all the time, what it mean to me? That's what she used to say, with a cigarette in one hand and a whiskey in the other. Anyway, love grandma, but seriously, what it mean to me? That's what your audience wants to know. What does it mean to them? And we've got to give that emotional context. Another reason why the calls don't land is because there's no internal shift, right? We've got to have them shift from, that sounds interesting. We want them to shift to, wow, that's me. That's exactly me. This is relevant to me, to my life, to what I want. So these are the reasons why those conversations sometimes stall. Can anybody relate to any of that? Can you relate to, if you can relate to it, just put a me in the chat. I just want to know if you can relate to those reasons why stuff don't happen like we want stuff to happen. It just don't happen that way. Excellent. I appreciate that. Well, I keep this moving. All right. And in all of that, those three things that I talked about, did I talk about your lack of experience? Did I talk about your lack of expertise? I did not, because that's not even part of the conversation. It's not even part of the conversation, right? But this is why the conversations need story, right? Not for entertainment, but to create context, connection, and meaning. It is a story that moves the conversation from outside in, right? Helps the people see the problem. So what I am talking about to you today, today's focus is going to be right here. We're going to focus on three things. When I work with my clients, whether I'm working with them in my 6-month-long coaching program or I'm working with them on some precision coaching, like when they just I have an event coming up next week. I just need you to help me with that. And we just do some precision coaching. It always comes down to the 3 questions, right? The 3 things that I need to teach. And the first thing is, what makes a sales conversation land? What is it? And then it is, okay, so you're telling me to tell a story, Star. What story am I supposed to tell? Because I got some stories. How many of y'all got some stories? Y'all got 15, 6, y'all got some. I know if you have lived over the age of 5, you have got some stories. Yes? So the question becomes, which story do I tell? What is the message that is going to move the conversation? And then the last thing we talk about is the flow. How do we structure it? How do we get the story flow that leads to yes? And that is what I'm going to talk about today. Yay. Because like I said, the sales conversation, the story that you're going to use is not here for entertainment purposes, right? It has a job to do. We're not telling a story just because we like to tell stories. That's not what this is all about. We need a story that moves the conversation forward. And look, it doesn't have to be the most detailed conversation. It doesn't have detailed story. It doesn't have to be the most impressive one. It doesn't have to be any of that, but it does have to be the one that moves it. All right, so let's just go ahead to the first part. What makes a conversation, a sales conversation, land? And I want to talk to you about 3 things that make it land. So I need you to put capture in the chat for me. Just put in the word capture. Capture, because that's the number 1 thing that we're going to talk about, right? Stories. Capture. Attention, right? And attention is so hard to get these days, especially the way we are all over the place. But story is what captures the attention. When a conversation includes context, right? There's context in the story. What I mean is there is a situation, there is a shared problem, there is a familiar experience. People feel that. And guess what? You have got my attention. You know, people are only interested in themselves. Really, they are. So if you're telling a story that's something similar to what I'm going through, oh, I'm in your story, right? As opposed to you telling a story that has nothing to do with me, I'm going to be sitting out here, right? So we tell stories so that we can capture attention, so that people can recognize themselves. So without stories, our conversations are sort of accurate. They're good, but they're generic. Do you know what I'm saying? Excellent. So the next thing is convert. Put convert in connect in the chat for me. Put the word connect in the chat for me, because that is the next part. Stories create connection, right? Connection happens when anyone feels understood and seen. Let me ask you a question. Has anyone here ever been on a first date? Anybody on a first date? Raise your hand if you've ever been on a first date. Now, any of y'all married, you better have your hand. All right, so everyone here has been on a first date. When you go on a first date, and look, I'm not even talking about just the romantic kind of first date, because sometimes it's just a sister kind of first date. Remember, Tony? Remember our first date? Right? We had a date, and that's what she actually calls them. So on that first date, what do you generally do? What do you generally do, right? Do you generally talk about your resume? Anybody? Do you generally talk about all your accomplishments, where you went to school? Well, maybe you'll talk about where you went to school, but you don't start listing your accomplishments. You don't do that. You don't give them your resume. What you start doing, there you go. You ask tons of questions and you tell tons of stories. Y'all know you do it all the time. You tell stories. Have you ever known someone, like you didn't really know them, but you kind of knew them, and then you spent some time with them, you heard their story, and then you liked them a lot better? Anybody? Raise your hand if that's ever happened, right? You hear their story, you go, oh, they're not so bad. That's the power of story. It creates connection. Stories create connection. And when you've got that connection, it just makes all the difference, right? It gives an emotional context. And that's what keeps the people engaged when we have that connection. That's why we tell stories. And the final reason we tell stories is so that we can have conversion, so that we can convert. Put convert in the chat for me. I just want to put it in there. Yes, David, we ask their story and we listen for connection points. That is exactly what we do. So the last part is the conversion, convert. We tell stories because they help us convert. They move the sales conversation forward, right? Decisions decisions don't happen when someone simply understands the solution, when they just see the facts, when they just, oh, I see how that works. Is that where they're making a decision? No, baby, they're not making that decision. What they're making the decision because they have the connection, right? If they can see themselves in the outcome, if they can see themselves there, if they can imagine a different result for themselves, if you make it seem like this result that you have gotten for other people could actually work for me, there you go. That's the internal shift that we need. And studies show that when people are connected, specifically in story listening mode, they feel that affinity, they are more inclined to buy, and they don't care as much about the price. You have experienced that. You might buy something and you know you could get it cheaper somewhere else. You know you could get it cheaper somewhere else. But you're going to go to this particular store, you're going to talk to this particular person. Why? Because you got a good connection with them, because you feel a connection with them. It doesn't matter. I'm going to pay a little bit more. I'm going to pay a little bit more, but I'm going to have the experience that I want. Am I right? That's how it works. That's exactly how it works. Excellent. So that is why we tell stories, because stories move the conversation from explanation to experience. And that is what people buy. I'm telling you, that is what the people buy. All right. So the next question that I get is, what is the message? What story should I tell? Which one? Like I said, y'all got lots of stories. You've lived some lives. You have some story. So you might be asking, you know, what is the story I'm supposed to tell? Mary, you're asking that question. What about you, Valerie? Is that what you're thinking? What story? I got lots of stories. Mary Sue, I know you got some stories, right? And you, Kenneth, I can just look at your face in your picture and tell that you got lots of stories. And so we need to know what story to sell. Like I said, it's not the most detailed story or the most impressive, the most dramatic. You know what it is? It is the question or the story that feels relevant. That's it. Is it relevant? Does it apply to me? It could sound as interesting as possible, but does it apply to me? Is it relevant to who I am and where I'm going? So I got to admit, when I shared that conversation earlier, the story that I told in the beginning, one of the reasons that the message landed so well is because of relevance. See, I wasn't telling a random conversation or a random story or a random version of my story. I was talking to a woman who was hosting a woman's event that was focused on voice, visibility, and impact, right? I knew who she was who she was serving, what mattered to her, and what she cared about. So I chose my message, which was losing my voice, finding my voice, reclaiming the stage, and basically reclaiming my voice, my visibility, and my impact. That's pretty much what the story was about. My origin story is so that's my target audience anyway, and that is what my signature story points toward. And that is why it works so well, because the story was relevant to her and who she and her audience. That is it. So we've got to think about relevance, right? Relevance always starts with shared problems. When people hear something that mirrors their own experience, they stop listening politely and they start listening personally. This actually applies to me. And they felt seen. They feel heard. I'm telling you, when people feel seen, the conversation changes, right? And this applies across various industries. Let's say you were in real estate, yes? So the message that moves the conversation forward isn't going to be on how many houses you've sold. I mean, it's like nice information. It's not going to be on how long you've been in business. That's nice information, but that is not where it's going to get sold. You know where the story sells? It sells when you speak to stress, when you speak to uncertainty, right? When you talk about the fear of making the wrong decision, buying the wrong house, or when you talk about the overwhelm of navigating a process that feels unfamiliar, right? When you talk about those things, then the potential clients hears you articulating their concerns. It's like, you are reading my mind. Have you been in my diaries? That's exactly what they're thinking. And that's what you want them to think. Yes. Let's say that you were in health and wellness, right? Your credentials, they rarely care about your credentials and how you got here. But you know what they care about? They care about whether you recognize the frustration that they have been through. If you know what it's like to try and try and try a whole bunch of things that haven't worked, if you can express the exhaustion of starting over or the desire to just feel better without judgment or exposure, if your story reflects that lived experience, they are done for. They won't just hear your expertise, they will feel understood. And that is what relevance does, right? When your story reflects lived experiences, people don't just hear it, they feel understood. Yes, yes, yes. And so my question to you is, have you ever been in a conversation where you just felt heard, where you just felt seen, where the person just, they made you feel like you were a real person? Have you ever had a conversation like that? Put it in the chat. Put in chat if you've had that feeling where you're just seen, you just heard. We've all had it at some point, and we've also had the situations where we feel unseen, right? Where we feel unheard, where we feel ignored, disregarded, dismissed. Now think about this. Most of the people you're talking to have had all of these negative experiences I just talked about. They've been dismissed, they've been interrupted, they've been underestimated. They have felt all of those things. And you come in with a story that makes them feel heard and seen. So all of you said yes in here, so you know how good that feels. That's what you get to give to your prospects simply by telling a story. What? Yes, simply by telling a story. But wait a minute. What kind of story are we going to tell? Because sometimes stories can get away from us. Has anyone ever had a person to tell them a story that goes left, right, and sideways? I mean, the story starts over here, it goes back here, and just when you think it's over, it kind of squirrels its way back to the beginning because they got to tell you what Aunt Mildred was wearing and the price of tea of China. Can anybody relate to that? Can anybody relate to that? Have you heard stories like that? Okay, just nod your head. Just give me a nod. Give me a nod. I could see you nodding. I could see you nodding. Yes, we have all heard stories like that. Craziness, right? And so it's not, David says too many times, my daughter can't tell a story to save her life. I'm telling you, my daughter, she says, Mommy, I was in the park and there was a bee. End of story. That's it. End of story. But you know what? I will listen to my baby's story. Oh, you're laughing, Stephanie. I know, it's hilarious. And I will listen to those ridiculous stories all day long because she is my baby. But your prospects, they don't love you like that. I'm just saying. They don't love you like that. So they're not going to listen to these stories going all the time. So we have to figure out how we are going to frame the story. How are we going to make the story flow so that it flows to a yes and not to a I could never get those 5 minutes back, right? That's not what we want. All right, so how do we get it to flow? Here is the relevant story framework, okay? Here we go. First part is, I've had the same problem. I've had the same problem you're having, or I know someone who had the same problem that you're having. And then I found a solution to that problem. I found a solution. And then I used that solution successfully on myself. It was fabulous. And then I used that solution successfully for others. And I believe that that solution can work for you. That's it. That's the framework. That's how you make the relevant story work. Yes, we can't just tell any old story. We got to tell a story that is I'm having some trouble today. It's my first day of the new mouth. Relevant, right? We want to make it relevant. So there's the framework, right? And so I want to give you an example, and I'm going to talk about Denise. Yeah, we're going to talk about Denise. So Denise worked in corporate, right? Denise was very good at what she does. I mean, she is the come in early, stay late, got her head down, getting her work done, had the highest numbers in the organization, but she kept watching everybody else get promoted except her. The breaking point came where they brought someone in that she actually trained. And you know what happened. You know what happened. She trained that person, Valerie, and that person became her boss. Doesn't that just piss you off? she was livid. So she goes into the manager's office. And she's like, I don't know what's happening. I don't like this. This is unfair, and I'm producing more than anyone else, and I'm not getting a promotion. What's happening here? Okay, so she was pretty upset. And her supervisor, the manager, looked at her and said something that changed everything. He said, you will never progress in this organization because you don't build relationships. I know Tony is going, yes. Now, that made her even more upset. It made her even more, what do you mean she doesn't build relationships? She was doing everything she had been taught to do. Work hard, keep your head down, and you'll be recognized. But she couldn't shake it. So she started looking around. She started looking, and she noticed that the people who did get promoted were the ones who were building relationships. They were going to lunch. They were having conversations. And so she thought, all right, maybe this is it, and I'll give it a try. She moved to another company, and this time she made building relationships just as important as doing a good job. The results were immediately. She became like one of the superstars, right? She got multiple promotions, and people in the office started asking her, hey, can you help me? And she started mentoring other people, and other people were able to get the same results. And that's when she decided to start her own business. So helping professionals build the relationships that actually move their careers. Ta-da! That is Denise's story. That's the story that we worked on. That's the story that she shares, right? And she is getting the results because people are going, oh my gosh, that's her audience. People who are in corporate who feel stuck, they can relate to this. She is saying, hey, I was in corporate. I had the same problem. I felt stuck and frustrated despite doing a good job. She's saying, I found the solution. I realized that success was not output, it was relationships. And so I gave it a chance. I put it to work. And guess what? The solution worked for me. I used the solution for myself. But wait, then other people started asking for my advice. And so I used the solution for them, and they got good results. And that is why I believe that I can get those same results for you. Y'all see that? That's the story. That is the story. So here's what I want you to do right now. I want you to take out a pen or a keyboard, whatever you need, and I want you to start thinking about a couple things about this framework. Yes, just a little bit. I'd like you to just jot down some notes. What is the problem your ideal prospect is dealing with right now? What is the problem that they face? And possibly it is a problem that you face or a problem that your clients face. What is the problem, right? Think about that. you want to think about what is the solution to that problem? What is the solution that you maybe found that you've used yourself that works? What is the solution that you help them see, right? How have you used or lived this solution for yourself? How have you applied the solution that you discovered? And how have you helped others with it? Right? And always we're thinking about what is the outcome you want them to be able to see themselves in. That's why we have to know what is it that they want, because your story has to end with what they want, right? If they want to be able to have to build relationships and expand their careers, well, that's where the story has to end. Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to give that some thought. I'm not going to sing. I will spare you that. All right. All right. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. So, do me a favor and put in the chat that one problem. Just one thing. Just one thing. One problem your ideal client or prospect is dealing with. Just narrow it down to one problem. Put in the chat for me so we can just share that one problem. We're not going to do the whole framework. How to find a good fit to college and how to pay for it. Excellent. That's an easy problem. Ad hoc sales problem process. Okay. All right. One problem that your ideal prospect is dealing with. Right. The loss of time. Or you said something about ready for tax season. That's craziness. But that's a problem, right? They don't have time to track income and expenses. Excellent. Women are not taking care of themselves with everyone else. And so the problem is that they're tired. And that's the problem that they're dealing with, that they know that they're dealing with. Struggling with Excel. I got it. The business environment doesn't reflect their brand story. Yes, these are good problems. These are good problems. So what we have to show is that we understand the problem, and that now, if you yourself haven't experienced the problem, you can tell a client story the same way, right? You can say, I had a client, or, one of my clients, her name is Pamela. Basically, her mother had the problem, right? Her mother needed financial help. And because dad died and she was in a crisis. And so she came and she had the problem, same problem other people have, right? She found a solution. She fixed things for her mother. She realized her mother is not the only one who had that problem. She used the same solution on herself. She used the same solution on others. And now it's in business. Same thing, right? So you don't have to actually have the personal problem yourself. You can talk about a client who has the problem. But excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So we're coming to the end. I'm just going to review this with you again. I had the same problem. I found a solution. I used the solution for myself. I used the solution for others. The solution can work for you. Or in Pamela's case, my mom had the same problem. I found a solution. I used the solution for my mom. I used the solution for others. And I can use the solution for you. Same. Good? Good. Give me a thumbs up if you got some good values here today. Give me a thumbs up. Excellent. So here are the 3 things we talked about. What makes a conversation land? What is the message that moves the conversation to yes? And, well, what is the story flow? So what is the message and how does it flow? That is what we talked about today. So here's what I need you to think about. I need you to think about 2 things you learned, 1 thing you're going to do differently. 2 things you learned, 1 thing you're going to do differently. Okay, write that down. 1 thing you learned, 2 things you learned, 1 thing you're going to do differently. You know what, Crystal? She's like, it was great to remind my brain of the things I want to get back around to doing. So this is very true. So we've learned this before. I have not shared anything new and different. I really haven't. But I may have told you some things that you don't remember, or I may have told you things in a different way. That's it. All right. So while you're doing that, I want to, if you've got some value from today and you said you got some value from today, I would like you to do something for me. Would you do something for me? Put your hand if you're willing to do a little something for me. Just a little something, Crystal. Thank you. Thank you. Just a little something for me. What I ask you to do is give me your feedback. So I'm sure you've been through Talkadot before. If you could scan that QR code, the code is talk, and give me some feedback. But wait. I'm not just asking for feedback. I've got some gifts for you within the feedback. When you finish giving me feedback, you are going to get one of my PDFs called 5 Strategies to Navigate Nervousness. Anybody here ever get a little nervous sometimes? Like a little bit. How many of us get a lot of, I saw that face, Stephanie. Some of us get a lot of nervous. A lot of nervous. And so this PDF is going to give you 5 strategies to navigate that nervousness. We're not going to get rid of it. I don't ever want to get rid of nervousness, but I would like it to be manageable. As one of my clients said, I'd like to speak without throwing up. You know, that's all we're asking for. That's all we're asking for. But that's not your only gift. Now, for some of you, what I shared here today is enough and you're good. But some of you, I want to maybe take this conversation a little further, right? I've given you the framework, but Star, I need a little help with that framework. So inside Talkadot also, you will have the opportunity to schedule a call with me. So if you go through the survey, when you finish the survey, you will have the PDF, and then you'll see the opportunity to schedule a call with me. And I would love to speak with you about what we talked about here today and any practical strategies I can share with you so that you can have more confidence with your sales conversations. Good? Excellent. I'll give you a few moments to do that.
All right. We have a question. So while they are doing that, I'd like to give you a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So Dan-MBB says, as an accountant, I haven't had the same problem that my clients have had, messy books, for example. So how do you use this framework in a case like this? And is Dan still here? Dan, are you still here? He may not be, but go ahead and answer it for the...
Well, it's the same thing I said in like with Pam. She did not have that problem, but her mom had the problem, right? So that's how she tells the story. And so it'd be the same thing for Dan. If I were working with Dan, I would ask how he got into this business. What was it? Because I know that was something happened. It may not have happened to him, but he may have seen it happen and it impacted him. That's where I would go, right? My dad had messy books, or my best friend was running a business and they had messy books and they were drowning in that. And so myself being an accountant, I thought, well, I can definitely help them. And I went in, had the conversation and found the problem. Basically a resistance to looking at the books, but I have the solution. I used the solution on that client and I decided to use that same solution on all my clients. And now we're doing well, and you can too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Even if you've never had the experience, you know someone who's had the experience. Is there another question?
Yeah, Kenneth just added a comment there. If your books aren't messy, it's not because you didn't have the problem of messy books. It's just that you're efficient at solving it. You weren't born with excellent accounting skills. So I like that as well. Reason I've never had the problem is because I know what to do and how to handle it. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Does anybody have a question?
All right. If you don't have a question, tell me this. Tell me one thing that you got from our time together. Tell me something you learned, something you're going to do differently. Tell me that. Tell me one thing that you got from our conversation today. And if you got nothing from our conversation, lie to me.
Scott in the chat says, tell more stories. Mary says, use the framework.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, you know what? I will not belabor the point. I'm going to give you 9 minutes back of your life back. The story has a job to do. Excellent. Get back to my story. I know it works, but I've gotten away from it. I get it. Story has to end at the outcome your prospect desires. Yep. That's where it has to end so that they can go, oh, I can get there too. That is all very good. Very good. And so I will leave you.
Well, let me say thank you to you for always giving us great energy, great content that we can use immediately. The next conversation you have, tell the story. So immediate. And this is the power of network in action. We're not your mamas, not your grandmama's networking group. We are all about helping you build your business. And I did put in chat, and it's on the Talkadot. If you know of other organizations Star can speak at, please refer her. That's the best gift you can give.
That is the best gift you can give. Thank you so much, sister. I appreciate this. And I was leaving you with this, So when my daughter was 3 years old and it was bath time, and the tub is all ready. I got the blue duck and the yellow duck because I'm not chasing ducks this time, right? Okay. So I got my ducks. I got a little ducky tower. I got everything ready for my baby. She is ready to go, except she's agitated, right? My little girl, 3 years old, she's agitated. So I get down on one knee and I pull her in close and I said, "What the matter with mama, baby?" All right. So I asked her what's going on. And she says, "Mommy, every day I have to take a bath. When does it end?" That's what my baby says to me. And I said, "Baby, it doesn't ever end. You can't think you can take a bath today and you're good for the rest of the month or the rest of the year. This is something you got to keep coming back to." And that is the same thing with the information you have learned here today, right? Mary can tell you, you can't just learn it here and think that it's going to always show up. This is something you have to keep coming back to. You have to be intentional when you're having your sales conversation, intentional about listening, intentional about sharing a story that's relevant to the prospect. It has to happen over and over and over again. My name is Star Bobatoon. I invite you to embrace your inner light and to be the star that you were born to be. Thank you for your time.
Right on, Star. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for always showing up. Thank you for bringing that energy. And thank you for the stories. This was fantastic. I do want to encourage all of you to come back on January 28th. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so we could go ahead and just take a quick look at the calendar. All right. Thank you once again to the beautiful Star. And next week, Wednesday, the 28th, we're going to have Warren Furr, his subject, how to kick the shit out of 2026. So definitely come back and check us out for our focus forum. And in February, come back on the first Wednesday of the month for our Network with the Nations, followed by the third Wednesday of the month. We're going to have February 18th, Melanie DeShong, The Sales Mindset, and Michelle Meir Feast and Alfred White. Chances are that you're leaving money on the table on February 25th, 2026. Be here for that. Thank you all for showing up. And yes, we look forward to having you again. Have a great one.